Hi everyone, my name is Parth and I'm back with another video which talks about how to integrate Angular with .NET MVC application. So let's begin. I would be covering the following topics. We'll start with introduction to Angular, then we'll see what is TypeScript, then we'll deep dive into Angular building blocks and its architecture, followed by Angular routing. Then we will see how to set up Angular in a .NET MVC application using Visual Studio. And finally, we'll see how to deploy a .NET MVC with Angular application on the server. So let's begin with what is Angular. So Angular is nothing but it's a JavaScript framework which is developed by Google. So you might be aware that JavaScript, it's not new to us. It's a old scripting language. And today in the market, there are so many JavaScript frameworks available. Like if you talk about React, it's from Facebook. Then we have vanilla JavaScript. We have Vue.js. So Angular is also one of the JavaScript framework, which is developed by Google. The basic use or why we use Angular is for creating SPAs. By SPAs, we mean single page application. So what is a single page application? So if you can see in the slide, I have taken example of a traditional application and a single page application. So if you see in a traditional application, whenever user requests a particular view or a particular page, every time a different page gets loaded. So every time it's treated as a new request to the server. Whereas if we talk about single page application, then basically we create a template view, and when user wants to see different views based on different actions he performs, different views get loaded into the same template view. So it's basically a single page, and it's just changing the view based on the action or based on the request from the user. So only the data gets changed in the view, but the page remains the same. So Angular is not new. It began in 2010 with the name of AngularJS, and AngularJS was not very much popular, so they came up with a different style of writing code in the later versions of Angular. So the current version is Angular 9. So if we talk about AngularJS, it was referred to as AngularJS or AngularJS 1. It was a JavaScript based open source framework. It was used to build CRUD applications. By CRUD we means create, read, update, and delete. This still supports modern desktop and mobile browsers, and it uses a subset of jQuery called JQLite. Now, if we talk about Angular versions, if we see from Angular 2 till Angular 9, it basically provides a clean architecture to organize code, uses declarative programming for UI. So by declarative programming, we means you don't have to specify what are the steps. You just have to declare it. It uses imperative programming for the logic. So imperative programming for the logic means that here you want to give steps one by one, that what will be the next step for this logic, then followed by the next step. It indicates best practices of the JavaScript framework. It has a support for end-to-end testing and dependency injection. It has powerful data binding abilities and has inbuilt support for user and end-to-end testing. Now, Microsoft introduced a similar type of scripting language to support Angular with .NET, which is known as TypeScript. So if you see, basically, TypeScript is a parent or it's a superset of ECMAScript 6, which is a superset of ECMAScript 5. So ECMAScript 5 and 6 are JavaScript versions, so you can say JavaScript frameworks, and TypeScript is basically the superset of these two. So TypeScript includes all the powerful, you can say, abilities of JavaScript. It's developed and maintained by Microsoft. It's object-oriented based. It's free and open source, so anyone can use it. And it's recommended for building Angular applications in .NET. So TypeScript, basically what happens is when we write a code in TypeScript file, there is a transpiler associated with it. So that is known as transcript compiler, or you can call it as transpiler. So the file which we write in TypeScript, it's being processed by the transpiler and it gets converted to normal JavaScript. But there are some advantages of using TypeScript if we compare it to JavaScript. And those are like, if you see the difference on the left side, JavaScript is ambiguous. Okay. But if we talk about TypeScript, it's a typed language. Typed language means it defines the data types clearly. JavaScript has less clear code, but in TypeScript, you can write much more clear code, which is object oriented based. JavaScript does not support function overloading, whereas TypeScript supports. JavaScript is difficult to handle if it's in a large complex application, but with TypeScript, you can easily develop a complex application. JavaScript, although the advantage is that JavaScript is supported by all browsers, TypeScript is not that much old, so it's being supported currently by limited number of browsers. Now let's see some basic concepts which are there in TypeScript. So let's start with class declaration and definition. So since it's object oriented based, so as we do in .NET, we declare a class. As you can see here, we have a class animal. It has three, you can say variables, fields, animal type, animal name, and animal breed, all are of type string. We have a constructor here, and we have a method display. In that method, we are calling a alert function. Then, like .NET, in TypeScript, we have interfaces as well. So you can see we have an interface species. It has a species name variable, a field of type string, and a species age of type number. Then this class animal is trying to implement this interface species, as you can see. Then we also have a concept of arrow functions in TypeScript. So you can see we have a method add numbers, and it's a function. We are passing two, you can say, numbers and returning the sum. Or if you want to shorten this, you can just remove function, so it becomes anonymous function. It becomes basically it's a, you can say, the shortened syntax of function. And in place of that, you can even use arrow. You can say arrow symbol in the last, where we can see where add numbers is equal to, we are passing two numbers, and arrow function you are using, then you are returning the sum of the two. So it has around 5 to 6 data types, which are number for storing the integer values, number values. It has boolean to store true and false, array, right? It's also used to store string or text in the string using the string data type. It has enum, and it even has voids, as we have in .NET. Next is modules. So in TypeScript, everything which we create is basically created as a module. So you can see we have two TypeScript files here. So first is the zip code validator.ts. So you can see that this is a class which is basically implementing a string validator. So string validator can be a class or can be a interface. And then you can see we have a user validator.ts file. You can see this is what it is doing in this is that if you see it is in the first line, it's written import zip code validator as alias from and the path is given. So here we are basically importing that class which we have created, zip code validator.ts. We are importing in the other file. And you can see in the first example where we have zip code validator.ts file, we are using export. So to send the file to another one, to another file, we use the export and import keywords. Now Angular has some basic building blocks which I use to create an Angular application. Basically, there are 5 basic building blocks: modules, components, directives, services, and routers. So let's talk about modules. So Angular modules basically help to organize an application into a structure to form a, you can say, a good or a clean structure. Components, basically it includes the templates, data, and the behavior corresponding to a view. Directives basically are, you can say, it adds additional functionality, or you can say these are some extensions to the existing functionality. Services, basically in services you put some common logic which if you want to call it into multiple components or modules, you put that code into service. And routers, so routers basically handle the navigation process in Angular. Let's start with modules. So you can see, to define a module, this is a simple example and there are some keywords. So if you see here, import ng module from @angular/core. So these @angular core, @angular platform browser, these are inbuilt Angular libraries. So @ng module is used to set up the components, or you can say parts of the application. Then we have Bootstrap. So Bootstrap basically tells Angular what is the root component of the application, means which is the first component to be loaded when you run the application. Then you can see we have @ng module in the example, which has 3 sections: imports, declarations, and Bootstrap. So Bootstrap we have already discussed. Then we have imports and declarations. So imports basically declare which other modules are injected, or if you want to use some external modules, you can inject them here. Declarations declare the directives, or if you have used any pipes, basically pipes are used for filtering. So if you want to declare some directives or some filtering pipes, you can declare them under declaration section in ng module. And then you can see we have this app module. So we are using export so that it can be used in some other files. Next is components. So if I talk about components, so you can see we basically, first of all, we use this line of code: import component from @angular/core. Then we use @component keyword. Now let's talk about different component, different, or you can say keywords used in a component in an Angular application. So first is selector. This tells the Angular that to create and insert an instance of this component where it finds a my app tag in parent HTML. So you can see in the example we have a selector. Its name is app-root. So wherever we define this app-root with an angle, inside the angle brackets, so it will load the component inside that. Then we have template. So template basically can be inline or external. So here we can see example of inline. So where we have written a heading tag, inside that we are using the title. So it's basically known as double curly bracket, or you can say interpolation. So just getting the value. We can also use some external templates, which means we have to give the path of external HTML file. Then if we see that a component has 2 parts, first is component annotation and second is component controller. So also you can see style URLs. So if you want to give us any CSS or styling, you can add that in the component. Anything you need external to your file, then you have to use import. And anything if you want to make available to other modules, for that you'll use export. So you can see here we are using export class app component so that this component can be injected or can be imported in some other TS files. Next is templates. So templates basically are nothing but you can say HTML. So there are three types of templates. Inline basically are of two types, and the third is linked template or external template. So you can see the first example. So here in the first example, if you see, basically we are using a linked template because in the template you can see we are giving a path of app.component.html file. If you see down, there's a second example. So it's a inline template of first kind where where it's just a, you can say, a single tag we are using, heading tag. And if you can see on the right in the inline template second example, we are using multiple tags. Like we are using div tags. Inside that, we are using one more div tag, and also we are using a heading tag. So it's a kind of a complex HTML inline template. Next is styles. So if you want to use some CSS file, so you can use. It has also two types, inline and external. So in the first example, you can see under style URLs, we are giving a path. So it's basically using the app.component.css, which is the external CSS file. In the second example, you can see we are using an inline CSS template. Basically, you can see that to heading tag, we are giving the color of blue. So it's example of inline styling in Angular. Next comes directives. So if you want to extend some existing features or extend the capabilities of HTML features in the existing code, you use directives. You can see there are three types of directives: components, structure directives, and attribute directives. So components we have already saw. So basically these are directives with a template. Then we have structural and attribute directives. So structural directives are those if you want to change the, you can say, document object model layout by just adding and removing the elements from the DOM. For example, ng for or ng if. Like in ng, if we want to, it's a condition is true, we'll remove this element, for example, right? If the for loop, if value is this, will delete this element from the DOM. Last is attribute directives. Now, if you want to change just the appearance or behavior of an element, but doesn't have to remove or add a new one, we use attribute directives. Like we have ng style, right, to give styling, or ng class to define a class or CSS class to a particular element to change its appearance or behavior. Next is services. So basically, if you see on the left side, we have three components, and each component we are calling this method. Do something, right, in all the three. So it's repetition of code, you can say, because every time you are writing the function, you are writing the logic. So it's a duplicate code, right? So if you want to make this code reusable, okay, in that case, you'll use services. So on the right side, you can see we have defined a service. Inside the service, you have that field one, which is a string type, and we have do something method. So directly, since this code logic is inside service, you can directly use the service in all the three components. As you can see on the right side of the example, you are using the service in all the three components. So services are used if you want to write some reusable logic and use it across multiple components. So we use services for that. Let's see how to create a service. So on the left side, you can see we have a product.service.ts file. So it's a product service we are creating. So first of all, we have to use this line. If you see here, import injectable. So this has to be used because if you don't use this, you cannot inject any external components or external functionality inside this service. So for that, if you want to inject some external features, you use @injectable. Then we have this class product service where we have this, you can say, a product array where we are defining product ID, name, and product price. Then we can see we have a constructor and we have a method get products, which is returning the list of or the array of these products. Now on the right side, you see we have app module file. First, you can see that in the fifth line, we are importing the product service, right? So if you see import product service from dot slash product dot service. So this will import the service in app module file. Okay. And then you can see under the ng modules provider section, we are using product service. So in provider section, we'll give the name of the service which we want to use in our module or in our component. So this will inject the service in the provider under the providers array so that we can use them in our module. After creating a service, now when we are consuming it, so you can see we are consuming it in our component. So you can see, first of all, we are using import product service from the path of the service. So we are first of all importing the product service into a component. Then you see that in our constructor, we are creating a basically, you can say, a private variable, and we are assigning that to product service of type product service, right? Instance, you can say we are creating. And then in ng on in it, what we are doing by using that instance which we have created, we are calling the get products method of the product service and storing that in the this dot products. So products, as you can see, we have taken it as an array. So this get products will get us the data, all the list of products from the product service, and we are storing them in the products array. And now let's talk about our template. So in the component, we are using a template, and you can see here we are using a for loop. So in the for loop, what we are doing is we are iterating through each item in the products array, which we have stored after getting the data from the product service. And then we are printing the product ID, name, and price. So Angular architecture, if you see, after talking about the building blocks, it's very simple. We have a module, we have a component, we have a can have a service, functions, and simple variables storing simple values. So you see that first of all, we have a component. Okay, in the component, if you want to inject some service, you use the injector, right? And you insert the service into the component. The component has a template and a styles. So it has a template, as you can see. And if you want to use some external, if you want to extend the HTML features, you basically use directive with your templates, right? And if I talk about the property binding and event binding, so property binding basically when suppose basically you are in your component giving some value and you want to use that value in a template. So it's a concept of property binding, right? And in the template, if you like, what you can say that is you are clicking a button or something, right? So that concept is event binding. So that flows from template to component, and the property binding happens from component to template. Next is Angular routing. So if you talk about Angular routing, so basically it enables navigation from one view to the next as user performs some actions. So you can see we have a sample application here, routing demo application. We have, you can say, four components: home component, employees list, department list, and products list, right? So basically all these four components will have their own separate views or templates. And by default, the Angular application runs on port number 4200, as you can see in the application. Now, how to configure routing? So step one is that in the app.module file, we will import all the necessary classes to be used for routing. So as you can see in the third line, we are using import router module and routes from @angular/router. Step two is under the declaration section in ng module. What we are doing is we are basically, if you see that it should contain the list of all the components which will be used for routing. So we'll apply routing on home component, employees list, department list, product list, right? So we'll list all the, you can say, component under declaration section of ng module. Step 3 is that a router must be configured with a list of route definitions. So you can see in the import section, we are using router module dot for route, and you can see here for each component we are giving a path. So basically imports property should contain the router module's for route function, which takes an array of routes as argument containing path and the component mapping, right? So you can see for path home, we are using home component. If the path in the URL is employees, it will redirect to employee list component. Same for departments and products. If you see the fifth one path, if it's empty, so it will redirect to home. Okay. And if it's user enters some wildcard characters in the path, again it will go to, it will load the home component. Okay. Let's see how to set up Angular with .NET MVC in Visual Studio. So you can use Visual Studio 17, 19, or maybe higher versions. First of all, you need to install latest version of Node.js, which is 12.16.1 as of now. For that, this is the link. Then you have to make sure that latest version of TypeScript is installed. The latest version as of now is 3.8.3. So to basically install TypeScript, we have two methods. So first method is you have to use this link, which is a Microsoft official link to download TypeScript. Method two is that if you have already this npm installed, node.js package manager, you can install TypeScript globally on a computer by running the below command on the command prompt, which is npm space install space -g space TypeScript. Step 4 is install the latest version of Angular CLI. CLI means command line interface. So as of now, 9.0.6 is the latest version. And it's basically, you can see that an Angular CLI is a tool for developing Angular based applications, right? For generating services, templates, unit test cases, and components in the Angular application. For installing CLI, it must have Node.js installed previously. And we can use the below command to install CLI, which is npm space install space -g space @angular slash CLI @latest. Step 5 is we'll create a normal ASP.NET MVC application project. Then we'll open command prompt. We'll navigate to the project folder of the ASP.NET MVC application, which is created in the previous step, and we'll run the below command to create an Angular application inside our MVC application folder structure. So we use this command ng space new space demo. So these are the steps. It will ask you, would you like to add Angular routing? You say yes if you want to include routing. Then it will ask you what type of style sheet format you would use. So here I've used CSS. And then on the right side, you can see it will install all the predefined files for you. Next step is that you can see in the folder structure that demo folder is created in MVC application because we use ng new demo. So we gave the name application of the name of the application is demo. So it's basically created a structure with the name demo. So you can see all these files inside that structure folder. Next step is to ensure that the Angular application is set up properly. Navigate to the folder path in command prompt and run the following command ng build. So if it's created perfect, it will be compiled 100% successfully, as you can see on the right side. Next step is moving essential files and folders to the root folder of the MVC application. So of all the files generated by Angular CLI, we don't need all the files. We only need these 6 files. So SRC folder. This is the folder which will contain the actual source code or the project structure of the Angular application. We have packet.json file. This contains the list of npm packages needed to develop the application. We have angular.json file. This will contain configuration settings for our Angular application. Then we have tsconfig.json and tsconfig.app.json. These are configuration files which must be included for all the TypeScript files to compile to JavaScript. And we have node underscore modules. These contains all the you can say required Angular modules or the node modules required to run the application. Next is that step is we include the files and folders mentioned in the previous step in Solution Explorer, except node underscore modules folder. Okay. Then we update the configuration settings. So how do we update? We open the tsconfig.json file. So there is a include section there that tells the compile that tells us to compile TypeScript from src folder only instead of entire project structure. So you can see in the include we have written /src. So it will only compile the TypeScript from this folder, which is src. Then we also see we have out dir, which is out directory under the compiler options. So basically this provides a folder for placing all the transpiled files, means when the TypeScript files get converted to JavaScript, those files. This is the location where they will be present. Okay, which is ./scripts/out hyphen tsc. Then we open the angular.json file. Here the source root will point it to src folder and output path will point to ./scripts/libs. Next step is we'll remove the demo folder which was created by the Angular CLI. Then we'll open command prompt, we'll navigate to the MVC project folder and we'll use this command ng space build. It will build the application successfully. Then we'll navigate to the path ./scripts/libs of the project folder and we'll notice that it has created some files after building the application under the libs folder, as you can see on your right side in the slide. Next step is we'll include this libs folder in our project .NET project. Then last step is we'll have to load this Angular in the MVC view. So we see that in a, let's say in a .NET we have a index.cs HTML, which is a view. So we'll use the script tags and we'll include all these 5 files, which are runtime, polyfill, styles, vendor, and main.js. In the end, we'll use the app-root. If you remember, in a component we have a selector, so we'll use it here and it will load all the component in our .NET view, right? Last thing is how to deploy a .NET MVC application which has Angular in it. So first of all, we'll right click the web project and select option publish. A window will open. We select the folder option and choose a path to publish the application. Then we'll click the publish button. Then we'll navigate to the location where the application is published and we'll notice the files generated for us. Then we'll open IIS. We'll copy the published application to the below path inside inetpub www root. We'll right click the application and select the option convert to application. So this folder will be converted to application. We'll fill the required fields and we'll click OK. So this will create a Angular application and then we can run it through IIS. So that's it from my end. I hope that you gained a little bit idea about Angular, TypeScript, Node.js, and how do we integrate it with .NET MVC application, and finally how to deploy it on IIS. So I will see you in some other video very soon.